there, my name is Jordan Leroy Hansen, also known as LevDev, and I'm here for the end of the year shenanigans. As of this recording, it's New Year's Eve, and tomorrow will be a new year with new janky brewing opportunities. But I do want to be reflective upon the year, and I will admit this year has been a little bit finicky regarding the Magic. There were some ups, there were some downs. Regarding to the standard sets, and this discussion will be kind of like within standard discussion, even though it's been good for many multiple formats this year, especially with Modern Horizons and some pretty good Commander cards, standard has been kind of going up and down. Like, if I had to rank the sets from standard, I would say kind of like the standard sets at the moment were Ravnica Allegiances, Core Set 2020, Throne of Eldraine, and War of the Spark. My ranking would probably be, my favorite set would probably have been, I would say, Throne of Eldraine. I just love the Grim Fairy Tales kind of like flavor of the set. I did love its mechanics, and I think a majority of my cards that we're going to be talking about did come from the set, even though there's some that did come from other sets as well. Least favorite is weird for me to say, but I think it's War of the Spark. For me, I like to play Super Friends deck a lot, so you would think a set that had, like, a Planeswalker in every pack would have been my favorite set ever. Why wasn't it? Well, I think it was one of those scenes where I did love their experimental design with some of their Planeswalkers, though I do think some of them kind of went a little over the edge and kind of warped the format. Like, we'll get to those when we get to those, and yes, don't get me wrong, Throne of Eldraine had the Oko shenanigans, and let's be frank, Oko was broke though. So, yeah, completely broken card. Though it is kind of secretly one of my favorite broken cards they ever made. Though, honestly, I'm so grateful that I don't have to deal with it in Standard and such. But, nevertheless, for now, though, we're going to talk about my favorite cards from 2019 Standard. There's just some really fun cards that were printed this year. And I kind of want to talk about them. I don't really want to go and say, oh, what's the worst cards? I've never really been a pessimistic person, to be honest with you. I try to be very optimistic, so rather than just being like, oh, this broken card, this broken Oko, this broken Teferi, broken Narset, blah, 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 I'm actually going to go and actually talk about the positives. What were some of my favorite cards of the year, and just explain to them why I enjoyed them oh so much. First, some honorary mentions. One honorary mention I do want to talk about is Kefis. I feel like Kefis is a really, really cool card that they made in Core Set 2019. I remember making kind of like one quick Commander brew around him, and he is a legit fun brew around card. Like, just putting a lot of legendaries in your deck and then just doing some weird kind of like brewing shenanigans. I even seen some of my followers and friends who also made their own Kefis standard decks. It's just a really fun card to brew around. Plus, I think it'll be fun in the future, especially when more new legendary cards are added into the format and such, so keep an eye, but this is definitely an honorary mention. Other than that, another honorary mention, even though it is kind of on the broken side of things, Chilean Tell of Tales. This is just a really powerful Commander card. Also, it's just a fun to put in as a one-of in Standard and such, just to do some really silly shenanigans. But mostly it's just there because I do love the ability of being a cast trigger, the fact that it ramps you, and pretty much exploits all the ramping opportunities that Standard has at the moment. It just can be a really silly card in the right deck. Besides that, also another one that's actually a Planeswalker is Tamiyo, Collector of Tales. Generally, I love the design of this card. I love how it's a tech card against kind of like hand hate and sacrifice shenanigans that your opponent tries to force you to do. Plus, just its ability to be able to pretty much return stuff from your graveyard, and also work as a mill engine itself. Really love the card. It is just a honorary mention, though. And since we're in the mention of walkers, I know due to War of the Spark, we're kind of into the realm of Planeswalker fatigue. Like, I think people are kind of really, 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 really sick of the Planeswalkers. And especially the ones that have free costs, like, I can mention, pretty much list off the ones, Teferi, Narset, even a little bit of Ashiok, even though I think Ashiok is one of the fairer, annoying free cost walkers, in my opinion. But to be fair, as much annoying as they can be, there was actually a lot of fair and actually, relatively speaking, well-designed free-cost walkers. And we're just talking about standard in general, so if we just go with 2019, so we just put in Core 20, War of the Spark, Ravnica Allegiance, Front of Eldraine, there's actually a lot of fair free-cost design walkers that they did actually made. Even some of them made the list. Like, for example, yes, Sorin was kind of absurd, but it's actually relatively fair at the moment, though it is kind of absurd in Pioneer. But there's stuff like, for example, Dovin, Shanra, Muyan Lin, Gideon Blackblade, Dovin, Kaya even. And even one popular card at the moment is the Royal Scions, and even some shenanigans you can do with Sahiri, Sublime Artificer. As much as free-cost Planeswalkers can be very, very cautious to design, and I do think it's something they have to be very, very cautious about, I think you can actually design free-cost Planeswalkers, because, to be fair, this year we actually had some very, very fair design ones. Kaya, ridiculously fair card, and just a really good tech card. Royal Scions, just a good card to help fuel an engine of an archetype that actually is just not the most competitive archetype in the world, but just a good fuel engine in general. Sahiri, artifact shenanigans abound. Domri, if you're a creature-based deck, you're probably going to play this card. And even Kiora, just for ramping shenanigans. So, don't get me wrong, there was a lot of broken free-cost walkers. I'm looking at Narset, I'm working at Mr. Teferi here. Heck, I'm looking at Oko, don't get me wrong. But there's actually a lot of fair free-cost Planeswalker designs, and there's a few that get on the list. I'll go into detail when we talk about them, but honestly, fair free-cost walkers is an honorary mention for me. And another one that's kind of weird, because I haven't really brewed a lot around this, with the exception of a few kind of bruise shenanigans, but, well, let's talk about it. So, let's talk about Fires of Invention. Now, this card is currently a very, very popular standard card for obvious reasons. It turns out this is a very powerful effect in standard at the moment, especially when you can get some very high tempo base oriented spells just to help you get control of the board presence. Casualties of War, a really high cost Planeswalker, just anything, or even just a good board clear and good card draw engine. Fires of Invention has been legitimately rocking the standard format. And even it's good in Super Friends list, which I like playing Super Friends, so yes, I like this card. But I do want to put this as an honorary mention, because I do think, like, it's one of those cards where I think you can do some very, very good janky potential with it. But I think people are, as weird as this is going to say, I think people have been being safe with the card. I think most people, when they brew their Fires of Vengeance, like, okay, what's the most powerful spell I can run? Let's just jam them all together, have a few minimal synergies, put in a ramp package, boom, there you go. But I feel like Fires of Invention can actually just be used for some more silly shenanigans that's going to be seen in the future once we get more mechanics within future sets. So, I say keep an eye out for it. Plus, there's just some funny shenanigans. Like, the most funniest Fires of Invention deck I saw while playing Ladder was legitimately somebody playing kind of like that drawbridge that gives your creatures haste, essentially, when you tap it. And then what they did is they had their Fires of Invention out, and then they played Ironclad Feet, and then finale of... It's the finale that makes a bunch of tokens, essentially. I always get the... actually, I could just search for it right off the bat, since I'm on the client. Finale of Glory. Like, they pretty much cast a big finale of Glory, made a bunch of Angel and Angel and Knight tokens, because they used their own mana along with the Ironclad Feet. Gave them all haste, swing it in face. It was glorious. So I do feel like there's some funny shenanigans to keep in mind with Fires of Invention, but it didn't make the list. So now, what made the list of, in this case, 10 cards that are my favorite cards of 2019? Well, first one on the list, it's no particular order, but the first one that was a personal favorite of mine, Fae of Witches. A 2-cost 1/4 fairy wizard. It has the, for people who are not familiar with Throne of Eldraine mechanics, it has what's called the Adventure mechanic, which essentially makes it a bit of a modular card. What it does is, essentially, you can either cast this as its creature portion of the spell, which is a 2-mana 1/4, flying, and then has the ability to bounce itself back if you discard 2 cards, Or you can, before you cast the creature portion, cast the adventure portion of it, which when you do, it exiles the card in its own kind of like exile zone, which then you can then recast the card from that specific exile zone. In this case, the adventure portion is granted, which is free in a blue. You may choose a non-creature card you own from outside the game, reveal it, and put it into your hand. Now, I personally love this card because one of my favorite cards in the past, let me make sure I don't select all of standard at the moment. One of my favorite cards in the past standard was personally Mastermind's Acquisition. Because it is just fun to have a card that is kind of like a tutor in your sideboard. Now, for clarification for people who don't know, when you get the outside of your game clause, this means your sideboard, and your sideboard consists of 15 cards. I love this type of effect because it can lead to some very janky shenanigans, or even including some very out-of-the-ordinary tech cards in your sideboard, because you're not playing to mainboard it, but you can tutor it out with Fae of Wishes in the right circumstances, or Mastermind's Acquisition if we're playing Historic. But Fae is just a perfect card for that shenanigans. Most silly shenanigans are non-creature spells, so being able to use Fae of Wishes to tutor it is perfectly fine. Like, you need a removal spell? There you go. You need a board wipe? There you go. You need a piece of your combo engine that you put in your sideboard to hide it so it doesn't get hated out by Unmoored Ego? Here you go. Also, I just love the factor that even if you don't use the granted portion of this, this is still a 2-mana 1/4, which there are some times where casting this as a 2-mana 1/4 is perfectly fine. It helps you if you're a Dirty deck and you need to stall against the more aggressive matchups. A 1/4 blocks those early game 1/1 haste pretty easily. So, honestly, I love this card. I can see myself playing more of this in the future. And to be fair, one thing I will say, both the art, aka the showcase art, and the regular art are both very gorgeous. Maglia Velleville, and then the showcase art by, forgive me if I'm butchering these names, Ryle Baguette. Really great card arts, in my personal opinion, for the type of card that it is. Now, next on the list, since we are still on the adventure shenanigans, let's actually talk about one of my second favorite, pretty much, adventure cards they revealed for Throne of Eldraine, Murderous Rider. I like playing black a lot. Black is kind of my favorite color in Magic, and this card is so good. Free, cost 2 free, lifelink. When it dies, put it on the bottom of your opponent's library. So it's a 2 free with lifelink, and then it'll be put on the bottom of your opponent's library. If it dies, okay, that's alright and good. But what's great about this card is the adventure portion, which is Swift In. 1 black and a black, destroy target creature or planeswalker, you lose 2 life. Honestly, with how much planeswalker fatigue we had this year, seeing this card in Throne of Eldraine was a breath of fresh air. Just being able to have a really good unconditional creature or planeswalker removal was great. And the fact that you also get with it just a 2 free zombie knight with lifelink that when it dies, shuffles back into your deck, which helps prevent fatigue shenanigans. Glorious card. I love this card. It is kind of one of those, like, it's pretty much a 2-word card. It's either you're using it for its removal spell, and you're using it for the body. It's modular. It's 2 for 1. Plus, there's some potential zombie shenanigans in the future, so I'm definitely going to keep my eye on this card. But if I'm playing black, I'm playing at least 2 of these in my deck. It's just that great of a card. So yeah, second favorite, Murderous Rider. Now, as I said before when I was talking about the whole spiel about free cost walkers, there was actually some pretty fair design free cost walkers, and even some of them I actually adored their design. And one in specific that came from Core 2020, one of the genres that actually was really, really cool, Shanla, Acolyte of Flame. This card is just a legitimately interesting design of card. 4 loyalty, 1 and 2 red, Planeswalker genre, put a loyalty 0/2/0 abilities, which is something that you kind of tilt your head sideways until you read them. First 0 ability, put a loyalty counter on each red planeswalker you control. That's really cool for Super Friends builds, to be quite frankly honest, because we have a lot of really cool red planeswalkers, and you can even go into the genre tribal shenanigans and be like, I'm going to cast a bunch of genres. Oh, and now I'm going to put a loyalty counter on each of my legendary genre planeswalkers. That is kind of hilarious, especially with how many genres where you do kind of want to get to their ultimate pretty quick. And plus, there's other red planeswalkers or cards that are hybrid of red or black, red or blue, etc., etc., or multiple colors, that getting them an additional +1 counter is nothing to sneeze at. Also, its second 0 ability. Create 2 1/1 red elemental creature tokens. They gain haste. Sacrifice them at the beginning of the next end step. Great ability that a majority of people who play this, like, mostly the most popular use of this card is for the second 0 ability, because this sees play in the pretty much a Cavalcade of Calamity decks, where it's just used to create 2 hasty 1/1s that deal additional points of damage thanks to Cavalcade. So, yeah. Pretty much, most people use it for this, but also the coolest synergy about this is that those tokens get sacrificed at the end of your beginning of your next end step, which makes it actually an interesting tech card for kind of like sacrifice matter-based deck designs, because you get the additional synergies from the fact that these creatures die and get sacrificed, rather than like get exiled or they go disappear, kind of like mini versions of this type of deck design, kind of card design essentially, where they exile the tokens rather than sacrificing them. And then it's -2, which is probably my favorite portion of this card. -2. You may cast target instant or sorcery card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard. If that card would be put into your graveyard this turn, exile it instead. This is probably one of my favorite portions of this card, mostly because it kind of reminds me of stuff like Snapcaster Mage or stuff like that, but it kind of makes this card very useful in actually control-based deck designs. Like, I love this card in Mardu Control, because what happens is, you play your Ingress Rampage, you play your Shocks, you play your stuff to control early game, and then if you need to recast a spell, all you have to do is just play Shaman Acolyte of Flame, do the -2, cast that really early game board control spell, early game, kind of like target removal spell. There you go. I just love the versatility. This is one of those really cool free cost planeswalker designs. It's very versatile. It can be used in multiple archetypes. It is just a really, really well designed free cost planeswalker. And it's one of my favorites. Now, while we are still in red shenanigans, for me, I like to do some silly burn spells or do some silly shenanigans. And one of my favorite burn spells they made was Electro Dominance. It's red and a red. Instant sorcery spell. Electro Dominance deal X damage to any target. You may cast a card with converted mana cost X or less from your hand without paying its mana cost. This card is just perfect for janky brew shenanigans. 1, it has multiple versatilities. You can use this as a lethal spell to help you win the game, but you can also use this as kind of like a way to get tempo in a sense, because what you can do is, like, for example, you see like a 4 cost, or maybe even in this meta, like let's say you see an annoying like 4/4 or 5/5 or such. Then if you have enough mana, all you have to do is just essentially, with the right amount of mana walks and such, or mana dorks, all you have to do is just be like, okay, end of the opponent's turn, deal 5 damage to that annoying target, and oh hey, I'm going to cast a free planeswalker, or I'm going to cast like a free temp creature, and help build back up the board presence. Now this card doesn't see that much popularity due to the factor that kind of like the Team Earth 1000-Year Storm decks has been kind of losing popularity, as well as the factor that if you're going to get a major tempo spell, Casualties of War kind of gets the ticket done on that. But I still love this card because it does have versatility of just being a good finisher, as well as just being a good tempo spell. And sometimes, as much as I don't like Simic Flash and its tempo shenanigans, I do like the shenanigans where it's more like you're controlling, but you're also just getting an advantage, and it can be used multiple uses. It's not like, oh, I'm just going to counter something. It's like, oh no, I'm going to deal damage to something that I find problematic, and then I'm going to hopefully build up my board presence. So yeah, I like Electro Dominance a lot. Probably one of my favorite instant spells they printed this year. That's not attached to a creature, per se. Next up, going back to another fair free cost walker design that I actually liked quite a lot. And it's a tie between Vivien Arcbow Ranger and Vivien Champion of the Wilds, but I think I'm going to focus more on Vivien Champion of the Wilds, because this is yet again another fair free cost planeswalker design. It has a nice static ability, which makes your creature spells be able to be cast have flash, which is a very powerful ability both in Standard as well as in Commander, because in Commander there is some silly shenanigans you can do with this card. Like, absolute silly shenanigans, especially with the Morph deck kind of scenario. The Commander Morph deck they printed this year. Silly shenanigans with this card. The fact that it can morph during each of your opponent's step is just absurd. But even in Standard, just being able to use some very powerful creatures is just being able to flash in at the end of the opponent's turn so you can try to avoid really annoying removal shenanigans is nothing to sneeze at. Plus, the abilities are relevant. +1, until your next turn, up to one target creature gains Vigilance and Breach. Actually pretty nifty, especially if you're going against any, like, Flyers deck shenanigans. Or if you have a creature that you want to both use as an offensive and aggressive unit, all you have to do is just +1, and then attack in. And then the -2 is probably the main cheese of this card, besides the flash, which is look at the top 3 cards of your library, exile 1 face down, and put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. For as long as it remains exiled, you may look at that card and may cast it if it's a creature card. Honestly, I love the -2 on this card, and the factor that it combos very well with the flash component of this Planeswalker, it just makes this a really fun card to play in creature-oriented deck designs. Just being able to tutor for a specific creature from that top 3, then being able to just wait it out, hope that you can cast the creature at the right time, maybe at the end of the opponent's turn, or maybe it's like one of those creatures that offer a buff to another creature, and then you can just cast during combat. Like, there's just the amount of silly shenanigans you can do with Vivian, and I think it's going to be a lot more powerful when Pharaohs comes out, especially since we're going to have a lot of gods, which are enchantment creatures, and being able to cast some of those at the end of the opponent's turn, I think it's going to provide some silly shenanigans, if you ask me personally, but I just love this currently in Standard. I haven't played it as much before, because I've been more focusing on kind of like the Corvold shenanigans, but if I'm running like a Super Friends brew, or any brew that's a very creature-oriented combo deck design, I usually like to put 1 or 2 of these cards in a deck. It's just kind of one of my personal little favorite little tech cards. And not even tech, it's just a fun, versatile card. Next up, let's actually talk about a card. Since we were talking about Oko before, there was kind of a culprit that kind of made the Oko shenanigans a little bit obnoxious. And I always get this. And the little culprit that we had was this annoying little bugger. Gilded Goose. A 1-mana 0/2 flying. When Gilded Goose enters the battlefield, create a food token. You can tap the bird to sacrifice a food, add 1 mana of any color. And you can also use it for tap it for 1 in the green to create a food token. Now, many people were very annoyed at this card because it did some very broken shenanigans with the fact that you can get turn 2 Oko and such, and just either turn 2 really powerful free cost Planeswalker. It just was very obnoxious in the month of October having this 2-card combo. But now that Oko is gone, and we mostly just have the Goose as the, the second partner in crime of that annoying little combo Simic food deck, I actually respect Gilded Goose a lot more as a card than I did originally when reviewing it. I actually like this card quite a lot, because the thing is, as many people are saying, like, originally when it was first looked at, people were just looking at it and thinking like, oh, it's kind of like a worse Birds of Paradise, isn't it? It kind of is, but it kind of isn't. As I like to say, it's a Birds of Paradise with an insurance policy. It has fun synergies with the factor that you can synergize with the artifact component of this deck design, creating the food tokens and such, so you can use it in Artifact Matters decks. Also, as well, just the factor that it sacrifices the food to create the mana, which actually helps it be very beneficial in, like, Sacrifice Matter decks. One of my favorite kind of like competitive decks that kind of got pretty much going through the end of the year was the Jund Sacrifice deck. And this was a typical 4 of in the deck. And due to that and its combo with essentially Trell Crumbs and such, I learned to actually respect and like Gilded Goose a lot more. Yes, it dies to anything, it dies to any problematic removal, but to be fair, this card is just a really good turn 1 play. And if you can get it to get a nice turn-free, really powerful card, that's not bad. But even itself, just the food component, it makes me, thanks to Gilded Goose and other cards, it made me realize that food was a lot more of a balanced, in quotation marks, mechanic than people thought of. Most people thought food was broken due to the fact that we had to deal with Oko, because Oko was Broko, it was obnoxious, it made Simic food a dominating deck. But with Oko gone, you kind of start to realize that food, while we still have to deal with the shenanigans of the Cauldron Familiar Kitty, which is oven shenanigans with food, still, food is actually a lot more balanced when you kind of look at it through the Gilded Goose and through that little angle. So, and thanks to Gilded Goose and playing with it a lot, I actually like this card a lot. I think I would play it, if I'm playing any green deck, I'm probably going to play Gilded Goose as a Fora, because it's just a good mana dork. You can benefit with the sacrifice synergies, you can benefit with the artifact synergies, and the fact that it creates food tokens helps you against the aggro matchups, so yeah, I like Gilded Goose a lot. It took me a while, especially since I had to deal with the Oko shenanigans, but actually, this Goose, while it's on the loose, was actually a pretty legit card, and probably one of my favorites. Though, I will admit, the fact that this card got released at the same time as the Untitled Goose game, oh my, the comedic shenanigans that provided regarding to jokes on online and all that stuff. So, legit great card as for standard, but also was great because it provided a lot of meme opportunities. Next up, the 9th card on the list, and the card that I think some people are a little bit salty of still, but I still love this card. Hydra Crisis. It's green and a blue for pretty much a 0/0, but when you cast this spell, you gain half its life and draw half its cards, round down each time. It has flying and trample, and it enters the battlefield with its +1/+1 counters on it. Now, we have seen this card a lot due to Simic Ramp and such, and yes, I will admit, it is a little obnoxious at times. But I do just love this card for multiple reasons. One, it's just a good late game threat. You'd be able to pretty much make it into a really big flying trample, swing in for like potential lethal or at least get a good board presence. But also, I love this card because it's probably one of the more well-designed comeback mechanics if you're playing a ramp deck design. Mostly if you're playing ramp, you kind of have the problem of dealing with mid-range or aggro, and you're losing a lot of life when you're playing ramp pieces and such, and there's a chance that you might be able to die before you're able to ramp, or maybe you just only able to play your ramp cards, and you're not able to play, like, your cards that benefit from the ramp. And this is both a payoff card for ramp, but it's also a good combat card. The amount of times that I just cast this for 2 to even 4 just for the Ets, just to be able to just gain 1 life in a few cards, or just like gain 2 life in a few cards, is a lot of times. And just the ability just to be able to make this into a 4/4 and just gain 2 life and draw 2 cards is a great combat mechanic. It helps us against aggro, it helps us against like some annoying mid-range shenanigans. Plus, I mean, look at it. It's a Jellyfish Hydra beast. This is just... If you need a card that summarizes Simic in Ravnica, this pretty much summarizes Simic in Ravnica. Now, don't get me wrong, the fact that we had to deal with the shenanigans of Nissa, Simic Ramp, and just the annoying shenanigans of that, I can understand why some people have a little distaste of this card. But honestly, I just love this card because in at least Simic-based designs, it's just a great combat card, and can also just be used as a good late-game finisher. Plus, it's a Jellyfish Hydra beast. What more can you ask for me? This is just a really cool creature design. In my personal opinion. And then that's the last card that is personally my favorite, that I both like the card and I love it, but I do have to admit I do have some, let's just say, issues with it, but it's more just a, I'll explain it. Kobold, Fey Curse King. A 5-mana Jund colors, essentially 2 in Jund, for a 4/4 flying dragon. Whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, sacrifice another permanent, and when you ever sacrifice permanent, put a +1/+1 counter on Corvold and draw a card. Now, let's get the little elephant issue room out of the way. While I do love this card, I do feel like the fact that this wasn't in the main set, and yet it was a Brawl exclusive card, is kind of a bit of an issue with this, because mostly when we're looking at Brawl deck designs and such, we kind of want to have cards that are not necessarily standard playable. Like, they can be, at least for fun, maybe for Kitchen Brew, be standard playable. But I don't want to make one where it's, like, absolutely a standard all-star, because then people buy out the Brawl decks, and then the purpose of the Brawl decks kind of lose its point when a majority of people are just buying it just because, oh, hey, I need this one card for standard. And the problem is, while majority of the other cards kind of was able to squeeze out by that, I mean, heck, even the Chulane, while it's powerful Chulane is, we haven't really seen a powerful standard brew. That can't be said for Kobold Faker's King. As many people who played against the Jund Sacrifice deck knows, this is an all-star card in the deck. Just the factor that you're able to do the Cauldron Familiar combo and be able to draw a ton of cards and make this into a big threat makes this a powerful all-star in Standard at the current moment. And that's my little issue. Still, that issue aside, I still adore this card. Yes, it's very powerful. Yes, it's a little obnoxious, but I just love what it does. I love the flavor of it, how it's this dragon eating up everything, getting bigger, but in exchange, he's sacrificing his stuff around him, like he's sacrificing his kingdom, he's sacrificing maybe his whole banquet and such, but he gets bigger out of it, so this perspective. So from a flavor point, that is totally spot on. Plus, it's just a fun card to brew around, both for Standard and Commander. Yes, in Standard, we see the popularity Jund Sacrifice shenanigans, but in Commander, you can just do some very funny shenanigans with Corval. Like, there's a lot of sacrifice payoffs, sacrifice outlets, sacrifice engines that, in Commander, I think a lot of people are having a blast with this card, as we already know. And it's nice to see that this card is actually even making a hit in Pioneer, so honestly, I just love this card. I love the factor that it's a card draw engine. I love the factor that it gets bigger. I just love the flavor, and I just love how it's a really good card. It's not like, I'm still a little bit peeved that it was a Brawl deck exclusive, which makes it kind of tricky to get unless you do the whole Collector's Edition shenanigans and all that stuff. But the fact that Brawl decks are now being released a lot more, so this card is a lot more easier to get if you want to. I still love this card. I love all the flavor. I love the Jund Sack shenanigans. I love sacrifice aristocratic synergies a lot more since I played it. Thanks to this card, it allows me to respect the Gilded Goose a lot more, so yeah. Kobold Faker's King, my 10th favorite card of the year. And that's all of them so far. But I will admit, as much as there was some really good things that the card design of pretty much WotC's design team did this year, there's also some obnoxious ones. There's also some ones that were just kind of but overall, I still love seeing it. I love seeing the future implementation of sets and just being able to do janky brews around them. I love just seeing them testing designs and such, and just seeing what they can do and the opportunities that can provide of it. And also, speaking of fun ones, I just now realized there was one more card for people who are about to make the comment, but this is just only 9 cards. I did actually save one best for last that I did love. As I mentioned before, I do love the Super Friends archetypes a lot, so let's actually talk about one of my favorite Super Friends payoffs that they ever made that came from War of the Spark. Sarkhan the Masters, and this is the actually 10th card, so I actually miscounted, so oops. Editing! Or maybe not, depending on how quick I have to get this video out, but we'll see. Sarkhan the Masters, free red for a 5 loyalty planeswalker. It has, whenever a creature attacks you or planeswalker you control, each dragon you control deals 1 damage to that creature. Honestly, while that static ability is nice, you're mostly using it for its abilities, which is +1. Until in a turn, each planeswalker you control becomes a 4/4 red dragon creature and gains flying. Or it's -3, create a 4/4 red dragon creature token with flying. Honestly, as I said before, I like playing Super Friend style deck designs, and this was the funnest payoff for Super Friend decks that they ever printed in design. Just the fact that you are able to get a lot of planeswalkers out, and then one of the payoffs is just playing this and making a bunch of dragon planeswalkers and attacking in. That's just fun. Don't get me wrong. I understand how people were planeswalker fatigue, and this card probably didn't help a lot since it did see some play in Jeskai Super Friends. Don't get me wrong. But still, let's think about it. The factor that you're able to make a dragon army out of planeswalkers and swing in for lethal, that is just so on flavor for Sarkhan. Let's cut the chase. This is just a fun card for Super Friends. It's just also just a fun, like, dragon synergy card if you're playing, like, dragon deck-oriented designs or even in Commander. So, Sarkhan the Masterless, I like the card a lot. It is also a favorite of mine. What can I say? Thanks to Corval and stuff, I like dragons. What more can I say? And overall, that is my favorite cards. And like I said, there were some good designs, there were some bad designs, but overall, now I see what it's like trying to do this off script. But hey, at least allowed more, hopefully, showing my legit honesty. Because this year, while it had some ups, it had some downs. I just hope it still provides some new opportunities for jank brewing shenanigans, as well as with future sets and future designs. I hope you all enjoy just my opportunity to experiment in Magic the Gathering. And as much as this game can be obnoxious, this game is also really fun, and I'm grateful for the design teams being able to work on this. And while they do make some mistakes, I do still appreciate having the opportunity to play this game and just see the weird, potential janky opportunities that the deck designs can bring. And I hope for now the next year of new opportunity and new janky brew designs. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you like it, please like and subscribe. I hope you all have a lovely day. This is LevDev, signing out. Badoo!